You seem to be in charge of taking charge of your whole career, kind of. You've got a good business head. You learned, I understand, from part of it. Is there anyone you can talk to about making career decisions? Is there anybody that you...
In terms of career decisions, for the past 4 years, really my career decisions I've made pretty much all myself. In terms of creative decisions, the only person I've ever talked to was my publisher, funny enough. Dick Leahy, yeah. Because he's the only person that I've met whose ear is as sharp as mine in terms of when I'm not doing when what my performance isn't kind of everything I should give. It's like basically what he's been is the type. It's like if I listen to something that I've recorded, say a month or 2 months ago, and I'm kind of waiting for someone to tell me it's not quite what it should be, it's not enough, then it's always him. And then when he says it, I know that because sometimes, especially as your track record builds up and you have, say, in England especially, the pressure, if you've had 4 or 5 number ones or whatever, and with every one, it's kind of harder to... Actually, I'm going to wait until these two have cleared off from it. We're walking backwards and forwards. I have to get back home. Creatively, I cannot work here in any way. There's too many distractions, and 2, I have a very strong sense of home, and if I'm not home in terms of my surroundings, then I'm not myself, and if I'm not myself, I can't really work clearly. I find as a producer, I'm totally... I'm at sea here, whereas when I get back to London or Paris or somewhere like that, I'm very focused.
Home really is home. I could never understand in those years when Elton and Rod Stewart and George Harrison, all those people moved here, how they could really stay away from home for a long time. It's terrific here in area, but...
I think it definitely damages people creatively, because I think your creativity has to come from... It really has to come from really the core of you, and I think when you're in a foreign situation, even though it might not feel foreign, I think if I was to live here now, if I were to move here next year, I would start. You have so many new influences that are gradually, even though they've always been there when you visited, they're gradually seeping into you, and the people around you are influencing you. You start to change, and if you're success has been based on the character you were before, I think the chances, I just think that mucking about with it is kind of dodgy. I don't know, I might end up living here in a couple of years' time. I hope not, but I might do.
We were talking about, does anybody have input to you? They can say, hey George, you shouldn't be doing this, or shouldn't be doing that now?
Well, people put in their people put in their ideas, but most people really have realised that I don't really have. There's very little that influences me. I do think very much I think very much ahead in terms of everything, in terms of writing, in terms of what I'm going to be doing in 6 months' time or 12 months' time creatively. So really, people leave me alone.
You don't feel a need for.
No, I'm not a very good collaborator at all. I tend to be kind of purist in the way I do things, and it's much easier to be that way when you're on your own.
When you guys started, when you finally put it together, what came out the other end, this sexy, teen-oriented image, was that pretty well contrived, or did it just happen?
It was quite odd, really. It was not so much contrived. I find it hard to accept the word contrived, because contrived to me suggests some element of deception, and there was never any deception. Probably the first image we had was more contrived, because the first image, although it wasn't an image that hit America, because America didn't really take any notice of us until Make It Big, the album Make It Big, but the first image was very much one of it was like kind of very cocksure, and it was two kind of street kids, which we weren't. We were street kids in the sense that we both we would be out of work, and we came from working class backgrounds initially, but we both moved into kind of middle class areas, and even though we didn't have any money in our pockets, our parents did, and we always had a security blanket, as it were, in that sense. So that was kind of contrived because it was kind of streetish, but at the same time, the lyrics were always very tongue-in-cheek, so we didn't feel that we were deceiving because we were parodying all the things that the songs were about. The first 3 songs were about in order. Wham Rap was the song was about unemployment. Young Guns, the song was about the perils of marriage at an early age, and Bad Boys was about teenage rebellion, child versus parent, and they were all very tongue-in-cheek because they were all things that weren't particularly. We weren't taking any of those subjects particularly seriously because they didn't really affect us. We weren't neither of us were really rebellious. We were both doing things that our parents didn't want us to do and following careers that our parents didn't want us to follow. But other than that, we weren't rebels. Neither of us had any plans of getting married at that age, and even though we were unemployed a lot of the time, it was no great hardship. So I mean, it was all done very, very, very much. That was contrived, but it was contrived in a very tongue-in-cheek way. The whole bit about the whole second image, the first American image, as you could say, with both with the highlights and the grinning, grinning guys in front of the camera. It wasn't contrived so much because we were both extremely up that year. It was our first taste of real success, and I think whatever we radiated was fairly genuine confidence. But obviously, it was very much marketed. That wasn't really me as a person, and it wasn't really Andrew either. The pair of us were a lot more. Our actual goals, we knew what we were doing, but our goals were much more, let's say, adult than that.
When I talked to Mick Jagger and asked, because they also developed an image that really wasn't them. They were all middle-class people, and they weren't bad guys. But they worked on that image, and in their case, he said, the image took over after a while, and that caused Keith Richards problems and Brian Jones killing himself. Did you manage to, have you managed to keep your music away from that kind of image?
I think at one point the image was vital to taking the success of the records to their absolute optimum. I mean, it was like people, for some reason, I never really understood it. I think in England perhaps it was the fact that we'd gone from being kind of street looking to very kind of pop stars looking, almost like we suddenly struck it lucky in that, and people were fascinated with that. Obviously people everywhere were fascinated between the relationship between the two of us, but I think it was vital to have that real, I mean, with records like Go Go and Freedom, we took really that whole 60s image and put it to records in the 80s, which did 2 things. One, it brought people into record shops and made them buy that confidence for some reason. They bought that. And secondly, it kind of turned just about anybody who couldn't stomach that violently against us, because I think the real point of Wham, and without it being a spoken thing between Andrew and I, it was always recognised, was that we did not accept the cynicism that was now taken for granted as being, you were supposed to adopt it if you had an intelligent attitude to music. And as far as I was concerned, I was far more musical than most of the people that I was reading about as a child. I mean, when I say as a child, when I was like 15, 16, I was picking up New Musical Express and seeing that even since I'd been reading it, and I'd been reading it since I was about 11, it was just a ridiculous cynicism which was starting to actually seep into kids' attitudes. It wasn't just the journalists that were thinking that way anymore, it was the kids as well. And the pair of us just didn't accept that. We didn't accept that pop records, although, I mean, there's a place for protest in music, and there's a place for cynicism. There's a place for every aspect of society, because society is now very cynical. That doesn't mean that there's no place for pure entertainment, and that doesn't mean that pure entertainment cannot be done in a very intelligent manner. I think that I consider myself to be an intelligent person. I consider myself to be a very musical person, and I think that the two combined were the main reason for the success of the records. I don't think that I have anything I don't think I've anything to be ashamed of in the trivia of a record like Go-Go. I've always been very proud of the fact that I could take a piece of music, totally divorce it from my personality, and craft it. You know, it was really a very crafted record. I don't feel a real ability to do that anymore. I feel that I am too aware. In a way, I suppose, really, Wham was successful, and we did what we wanted. We achieved what we wanted to achieve. But I suppose cynicism eventually got the better of me, because not because I'm any more cynical, though I am, I suppose, but simply because I couldn't face having to try and drum it into people any longer. You know, it was having too much. People were taking the image too seriously, and they were seeing me as that person. And I could only fight it for so long, I suppose. I mean, we were making records. I mean, Everything She Wants came out, and Everything She Wants was accepted as a break from the way that I normally wrote. And my reaction to that was to release the first thing after that to be I'm Your Man, because I'm Your Man totally steered clear of any kind of message again. It was very much a pop record again. And it was my way of saying, listen, you know, I've done that, or I've done Careless Whisper, but not because I've suddenly grown up, simply because I chose to do that, and now I choose to do this again. I choose to just make a trivial pop record again. I was very kind of stubborn about it. And in a way, I think eventually I thought, well, you know, you're now actually you're making pop records 3-4 years on for the sake of proving that people weren't right. You know, that people weren't, that you're making them now for the sake of saying pop records are just as good as anything else I can write. And really, there's no point. I mean, what's the point? I don't really feel the need to prove that to people anymore. I'm sure I will write pop records, but the records that I'm writing now tend to be much more a reflection of my real character as opposed to just craft.
Do you think you turned the tide of cynicism at all?
In the sad thing about the fact that America didn't, although I don't think America would ever really have warmed to Wham the way that the rest of the world has, because America has such strong. America is so strong. You know, Americana itself is so strong, and people's attitudes are so strong. Whereas originally I thought maybe if we'd had that extra 18 months that we had around the rest of the world, we might have achieved a lot more here. I think all that would have happened was we would have been more successful. We wouldn't necessarily change people's attitudes. In England, the last year of our career in England was so satisfying, because basically what happened was it actually turned around. We became, partially because of our involvement, but partially because of our presence in national media day after day after day for about 2 years. I think we became kind of like a tiny little part of the structure of British society. You know, I mean, very minuscule part, but nevertheless, it was something that didn't seem to have been done since the 60s. You know, and that was one of the things that I was working towards. And the other thing was that really, Wham are now very acceptable. Even the back catalogue of Wham is very acceptable in England among my own age group. The people read enough interviews and were like kind of warmed enough to us because of records like Everything She Wants and I'm Your Man, Different Corner, things like that. Eventually, we did actually turn the tide in terms of people recognise the difference between a pop record and a good pop record, a real good pop record, and they started. I personally got a lot of pleasure out of the fact that people recognised me as a writer, even in pop terms, you know, which was. I mean, there were something like 1 million applications for the final show at Wembley, which is a 72,000-seater. We were the first pop band to really have played there. I mean, Elton was the last real big gig before that, who headlined, and Elton, although he's a pop artist, is very much a crossover and is much more adult. And our audience that day went from everything through the kids of like 13 up to people like 40, 50 years old, and it was like, and the majority, I would have said, of the audience was probably around 18 or 19, which was something that I wouldn't have thought we were going to achieve, say, 18 months ago.
Well, it's startling. You know, you're often compared to Elton in terms of songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
that it took you so short a time to achieve that spot in UK for sure.
Hmm.
How did it happen so fast? Well, did you think, Elton, when you were saying that some of the people you thought were not so musical, who did you think was terrific when you guys were just getting started?
Well, I'd always, I mean, as children, Andrew and I had, that was our first talking point. When we met, our first talking point in the classroom, when we were about 12 years old, was the fact we both just bought Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And I was a huge Elton fan. I was a huge Elton fan from the age of about 9. And really, that, I mean, I think I'm kind of surprised that his influence that hasn't shown more in my own writing, because I recognise my own influences, and I think it's surprising that it hasn't. But it's just his melodies were always so strong, you know. And when I suppose by the time we were starting the group, I was probably. You see, I mean, I think I've a very natural leaning towards a lot of R&B music, and that's either something that you appreciate or you don't. I think you either have that in you or you don't. And even though I had it in me as a child, I wasn't exposed to much black music simply because I listened to white radio. I came from a very white suburban area, and until the kind of Saturday Night Fever boom, there wasn't very much black music on radio. And so apart from, as a very small child, I had 3 records that I was allowed to play on this. I had literally one of those wind-up things out in the garage, and my parents had thrown out 3 records, which were Delilah by Tom Jones, which is a strange one to start with, and Stop in the Name of Love, and Baby Love. So I had those. My first ever listening was to like kind of to Motown Records, which is great. But then after that, all I heard really was basically white pop music for the first half of my adolescence, and then after that, from about 14, I concentrated so heavily on absorbing all that black music. American black music was coming over that I didn't really listen that much to white artists anymore, apart from the fact that the second half of the 70s was a very dead period for white artists, you know.
You really wanted to be a star, didn't you?
I wanted it. I mean, I wanted it with a passion, but it was a kind of. I mean, it sounds very easy to say in hindsight, but I've always had a very strange sense of my own future, and as a child, even though I had no idea that I could write or sing, I was convinced that I was going to be a pop star. I had no real inclination to shout about it, because I just felt it was going to happen. And there are those strange moments that you remember as a child. You can remember a certain thought, and I remember at various occasions between the ages of about 7 and 15. I remember if I got into any kind of difficulty, whether it be at school, with friends, or if I ever, because I kind of felt sometimes like an outsider, even though I wasn't. I was very social. I had this kind of thought in the back of my head that it wouldn't really matter, because one day I was going to be separated. I had this thing. I mean, now that I'm here, I don't feel special for being here, but I had this feeling that I was going to do something special, you know, and there was going to be something apart, which I've spoken to other people that have said the same thing. I mean, of course, it's easy enough to say in hindsight. There's probably loads of kids that think they're going to be very special or do something very out of the ordinary, and then they don't. But that's just the way I remember it. And I don't understand why I felt that way, because I had no idea what I could do. When I was 13, 14, I hadn't really thought about whether I was going to sing. I originally played the drums. I played the violin before that, because my parents wanted me to. And it wasn't until I don't think it was until we made the album Make It Big that I actually accepted that I was a singer. That I could actually I was going to be a singer that was more than like just average, that could actually get some respect from people. And that seems really strange to me, you know, that I had a real belief in myself as a child, but I didn't know what as.
How did you deal? You had so little experience in dealing with success. How was it to deal with this explosion that happened, this Make It Big album? How much did it change you?
It must have changed. I mean, it obviously changed my confidence in some. I mean, I've always seen my career and my personality as being quite separate things, and I think really that my confidence as an artist as a writer and a singer grows all the time. My confidence as a person has pretty much stayed on the same level. I'm very aware of the fact that stars left, right, and centre. I mean, especially the stars that I've met. If you can see people's success reflected, or you see your own success reflected in other people's success, and meet celebrities all the time, then you'd be stupid not to notice the weaknesses they have, and not to realise that they're things that you're just as vulnerable to. I mean, I think I'm very guarded against. I mean, like this, for instance. I mean, being in Beverly Hills. And having the Mercedes and all the cliches, they're the kind of cliches that I'm very aware of all the time, and I take very much with a sense of humour. I mean, I'm not an extravagant person. I don't like to buy things or have things. I don't really take much pleasure in stardom, as it were. I take a lot of pleasure in the freedom it gives me creatively, and as a person to be able to be any place I want, when I want. I take a lot of pleasure in that. Other than that, I don't really wallow in people's perception of me, because I find people's perception of me very false. So in that sense, I think I've managed to keep hold of my own personality. Apart from anything, I don't surround myself with new people. I'm very much around the people that I've known all my life.
At a certain point, you have to avoid the difficulty of being George Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Like how hard is it to be Frank Sinatra?
Yeah.
You stand back, my God, all those years, all those people. You had a real grown-up problem you had to deal with Andrew, and that had to be very worrisome while it was going on, wasn't it?
What, the split?
Yeah, that you knew you had to come deal with it at some point.
Not really, no. I mean, people always find it very hard to accept how easy my relationship with Andrew's always been. I think it's basically for two reasons. One is that Andrew's a supremely confident person. He always has been, and he had no. Although there was a little tension in the very first year of our success, from the moment Andrew really saw me take hold of my own creativity and grasp what I was going to be doing, because however confident someone is on the inside, it often takes some kind of catalyst to really bring it out. And I only really grasped what I could do with my career after about a year of success. And the minute Andrew saw that kind of energy, he saw me kind of go into overdrive, he just stood back and said, look, fine, this is what's going to happen. There's no way that I am going to be a positive input in George's creative output, as it were. So I'm going to stand back. He basically he's very much he's very much a fan in that sense. He doesn't like he sees what I do creatively as someone else would. He doesn't take what could have happened into account in terms of whether we could have been a collaboration, because he's always been very pragmatic about it, and said, look, anything I'm going to write, he's going to write something better, so what's the point? I mean, it's like a lot of people would have taken that in a very bad way, but Andrew just as a person in general is very confident. He doesn't need to feel that he is in competition with me or anyone else for that matter. He understood his purpose in terms of image. He was always the first person to say, look, I'm half the image. This group is working as a musical entity and as just an image in itself. There's no way that I don't believe that I would not have achieved what I am aiming to achieve, because I still haven't got halfway as far as I'm concerned. But I don't believe that I would never have achieved what I'm going for now. But I think it would take me longer without a foil. And I was no more using Andrew than he was using me. The pair of us went into it together, really not knowing this was going to happen, really not knowing how my career was going to move. And having realised the situation, I was not going to drop Andrew. I had no need to drop Andrew. Andrew served a purpose for me, I served a purpose for him, and we were still very good friends. So while that relationship lasted, there was no need to start really thinking about whether we should be splitting up. Although we both talked often and knew that at some point we would not. At some point, the image would not be worth maintaining, and that point came last year simply because I was starting to find the restrictions of being Wham in a creative sense, because we could have just kind of kept on being Wham and me gradually making George Michael records, but that would have been a real sham, you know. As long as we could make records like I'm a Man or Edge of Heaven and still do it with conviction and make them sound really, give them as much energy as Wham was known for, then it was a good thing. But when that started to become a chore, you know, then it really didn't. There didn't seem to be any point in it. There didn't seem to be any point in me or us promoting music that we were no longer going to believe in. And I do believe in the records that we released up until the moment that we finished. But we both sensed that it was everyone with the Vultures were coming in. It was like time for when a Wham going to have. I mean, this is at home. This is where in England, which is where we live. So obviously it was important to us. It was going to be when a Wham going to have a #2 single, not a #1 single. Who's coming up next? All this, and it was starting to be. Well, we are fighting to maintain excellence, which you have to do. But there's no creative pleasure out of having to write #1 records, you know, and having to be on top all the time. It was just a pressure that was no fun anymore. And we were both very financially secure by then, and Andrew wanted to do his racing. There were all kinds of outside influences, but basically we both knew it was coming. We just didn't know when it was coming, and when it did, Andrew raised no objection, you know.
Well, the comparison one thinks of is Simon and Garfunkel, which was rather one-sided in the creative area, but yours appeared to have been far easier and far more amicable than their breakup.
I mean, it was. I think apart from anything else, I don't know about Simon and Garfunkel's how long standing their relationship was before.
They had been a lot more years than you had been, and Art did sing.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah, I know the history of the group. I meant before the group was actually successful.
They struggled a bit. They were Tom and Jerry, and then they struggled. And
it's just that Andrew and I knew each other so intimately for so long that really the way we talked about our own relationship was constant. It was throughout the thing. So there were never any surprises, you know. And whenever there was any tension, I'm the type of person that kind of tends to drag honesty out of people, you know, even if they don't want to give it. So it would be like, if there was any tension, we'd end up, after 6 or 8 months, we'd end up having a round and getting it all clear, and then it'd be fine again.
When when the decision was made that you wanted to go on your own, by the time this book gets to press, it will have done, but what do you want to be? What do you want George Michael, what kind of artist? How do you want to be regarded?
I think I have a very privileged position in that I am 23 years old and have had 5 years in the business, 5 years which have taught me an awful lot, and I've absorbed an awful lot. So on the business side of things, I'm in the lucky position that I can make clear decisions at 23. But the main privilege of it is that everyone is right now expecting me to move into the kind of artists that they've been comparing me to for the last couple of years, i.e. another Elton, or maybe something more MOR or whatever. But I do have the advantage of youth, you know, and I have a very, very... I've started to make music the last 6 months, which I feel is every bit as convincing as the music I've made before, and it is on... Basically, I've been bought by either end of the spectrum. Up until now, I've been bought for... My records have been accepted by a lot of kids and a lot of much older people who like the fact that the style was kind of old-fashioned and very structured. And that area in the middle, my own age group, have only just started to accept me. But the music I'm making right now is, I think, probably... I'm going to make 2 types of music. One is the type that people are expecting me to make because it's really what I'm best at, and well, I would imagine whatever happens from now on, I'll probably be remembered the most for is my songs in terms of structured ballads and stuff like that with strong melodies. But also, there's a much stronger... There's a kind of sexuality that I haven't really made the most of with the first part of my career, and which I didn't really feel I had any real place with the pop music I was making. And now I just want to take advantage of the well, basically I want to use my love of black music and kind of make what I feel to be good modern R&B records, and if it works, and there's going to be a very drastic shift in image as well. If it works, which I think it will, I think it'll probably be quite. It'll be the first time it's happened, because basically I should be able to convince two very different markets to like the same artist.
As long as the motivation, and this is only gratuitous advice because I've seen it happen with a songwriter, Jimmy Webb. I've seen it happen with a group, The Association, that had a groove. The outside talk bothered them so much that they changed in ways that really didn't come from the inside. They changed in reaction to that. Now, obviously, you can't totally dismiss that, but the danger that you face is an overreaction.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
To that.
But you see, the thing is that I've always reacted. I don't think I'm likely to do that now, simply because I've always reacted very much in terms of I'm going to do what I love doing. You know, fuck you lot if you don't like. If you're not going to accept the fact that a great pop record is a great pop record. You know, if you can't understand pop anymore, then I don't care. That's what I'm making, and it still sells, and people still love it, and I still love it. And I'm not going to shift because I think I should. I'm shifting because I think, whereas as an 18, 19-year-old, my character and my excitement in coming into this business made it much easier for me to make pop records. I feel much more the need right now. It is very much from inside to make the kinds of records that I listen to all the time now. As well as, you see, I don't have to listen to ballads all the time to write the kind of ballads I write, because I have a very strong feeling about that type of music, and I have a very strong need to express myself emotionally in music. Also, but whereas I didn't really feel, I don't know, maybe I suppose obviously as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, you're more. Obviously, I'm more experienced sexually than I was as an 18-year-old, so maybe it's time for that to start reflecting in the music. But for whatever the reasons, the music that I'm making now, although it's very different to the music I was making 3 years ago. It now feels more natural to me, and I've been restricted from making that type of music simply by the nature of the group. So, in other words, I felt that apart from the actual tension of having to make records in the style that Wham was accepted, I felt that it was going to start to sound fake. It was going to start to the less natural it became to me, obviously, the less exciting the records were going to be. And as everything that I've ever written, which I've felt everything I've ever written has come to me naturally. I've never had to force anything, and that's why it's been successful. I would imagine that me doing something in a different area, which is now natural to me, should be every bit as successful, because it'll be just as musical.
There's another weight that you carry in addition to the musical. It's the imagery of the looks and the sexiness. Is that a problem?
I don't find that a problem at all. I think it's an advantage. I think I just want to shift that. I think the sexuality has always been very kind of the sexuality that people associated with Wham has always been very kind of sterile. You know, and it's because it's very, you know, that was the thing about the 60s. I mean, who would say that the Beatles had an overtly sexual image, but kids that went absolutely wild, because most of the kids that went wild were virgins. You know, this is the point. And that's something which I never really associated until a while ago with Wham's image. And although Wham's image wasn't me, Wham's image, the Make It Big image, was really something which I felt would fitted the music, because the music was 60s in its approach, even if it didn't all sound 60s. I now realise that that was one of people's main objections, and I just want to shift that sexuality into reality. And I mean, my sexuality is that of a 23-year-old, you know, in the 1980s, and if I can reflect that as successfully as I reflected the other areas of my image, I think it should work really well.
You have all the perks of being a star, all the things that happen in the invitations and the People magazine and National Enquirer. Will that continue? Will you continue to be out and around? And
it's very strange. I have a it's a kind of dichotomy that I think a lot of stars have in common. It's an obsession with success and recognition of success, and at the same time a real need for privacy. And I think I toe the line pretty well, because I really don't go out of my way to be at events, society dues. I mean, I'm really not very much a showbiz type person, so I don't feel that I feel that when I am chased by paparazzi and people like that, especially in England, I feel that I really do have a right to complain because you know, I don't really ask for it. The only thing is that America is still, to me, to a degree, a retreat, because I'm far less visible here. And even if I was, I mean, the fact is that America doesn't have anything like the fascination with me that my home country has, simply probably because, one, my career is not as advanced, and two, I'm English, you know. I find the English pressure very, very hard, which is why I spend so much time here. And there is I have a certain fear that I will lose that privacy over here too. But it's very hard to stop yourself from trying to move on to the next level, you know, because when you have that kind of, it is like an obsession with success, the things that you want to do will automatically not just make you more successful in terms of people buying your records, or if I decide to do a film, there are the challenges that you want to give yourself are automatically going to bring you more of what you don't want, which is that public and media fascination, you know.
There's obviously two extremes. You have a Bruce Springsteen or a Dylan who really go into a bunker, and Rod Stewart, for instance, who for a period here when he was married was out at every supermarket opening or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I think you probably have a better chance of your privacy here, even if your recognition factor is up, because this community is accustomed to it.
Yeah.
Next door can be Robert Redford, or Sly Stallone lives up the street.
It depends, doesn't it? It depends on what type of star you become. I mean, I do have a feeling that simply because of my age, I do feel that my career hasn't, and not just because of my age, but also because I'm a songwriter, as opposed to, in essence, my career is based around my songwriting. I mean, I think I'm a good singer, and I think I will be a lot better singer one day than I am now.
Let me hear in Los Angeles
Yeah.
that you can be anonymous. No such luck. You feel a lot of pressure with this first project that you're going to do by yourself? I mean, there seems to be so many creative thoughts swirling around.
Not really pressure, because I've started. I mean, I was a little scared before I went into the studio to work on anything, because I've had songs swimming around in my head for about 2 years that I knew I had to wait until the actual break came, and I was kind of nervous to put them down to tape in case they actually, because you see, because I do write in my head, so I don't demo anymore, because I hate the idea of, what I tend to do is I used to demo, and then I get so carried away with the demo because I'd be really excited that I'd get a great performance, vocal performance, and great feel and everything. But it would have been done so quickly that obviously it couldn't be a master, and then you'd have to go in and recreate that. So I'd rather have the actual excitement come out of the mastering, you know, when I, in other words, the first should be the first, and the first and the last. So I don't demo, and that means that I just keep the songs and the arrangements in my head, and I've got like about 6 now, and I've only put 2 of them down, and I'm really excited. Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's been a long time now. The one that the first one I put down was 2.5 years old, and it is true, I do manage to keep the entire arrangements and the lyric and melody and everything in my head, and it's very, very silly in one sense, because I mean, I might go and bang my head tomorrow or something, Where's wood? There's no wood to touch.
Yeah.
Touch wood. I don't, but I mean, I might go and have a nasty fall or something and lose, an album's worth of material. But I have this thing that if it's in my head, it's and it's still there. It's because it's meant to be there. I have it's like a superstition. But yeah, I've just started actually putting down these tracks, and they are. I'm very excited. There's no way it's not going to be fine.
You've had a couple of real major appearances that we've seen, in addition to Wembley. How did the Motown show come about for you? How did you get involved in that?
How did I get involved? Oh, I was contacted at the end of '84, I guess. Was it '84? I was contacted at the end of '84 by the Motown office, and they said, basically, would George like to come sing Careless Whisper with Smokey Robinson? Of course, obviously I was very thrilled, of course I was going to do it. And then they said, and also, would George like to name another artist, any artist on Motown that he'd like to perform with? So I thought, this is like, I was just kind of shocked, I just didn't understand. And then they also told me there were only 2 or 3 artists, white artists on the show. And I presume that the initial, the invitation must have been based on the fact that people recognised the Motown influence in something like Go-Go, and presumably because Careless Whisper had just been a big hit on the black chart and everything, and it was, and I thought, well, I'll go for the big one. I don't suppose I'll be able to, but I said, could I perform with Stevie Wonder? And they said yes, and they said, have you any choices of songs? And I just couldn't believe I was getting all these opportunities, so I chose the song and everything. And it was probably, as a singer, I guess that and the studio, the studio recording with Aretha Franklin are obviously the highlights of my career as a singer. But I didn't know exactly. I even when I got there, I wasn't quite sure what I was doing there. Although I was very pleased with my own performance on the day, I think I kind of. I was very scared, but I think I kind of rose to the occasion as opposed to being intimidated by it. And I just hope that I get a chance to do that kind of thing again. I think I probably will. It's just a great compliment, to be accepted as a singer by a community of singers that are the best in the world.
What was the China experience like?
It was pretty horrendous, actually. It was pretty much. It was historic, I suppose, and it was a great opportunity to do something that I mean, there are very few things that you can do as a pop band that haven't been done before now. What can you do other than sell more records than anyone else or whatever? It's all kind of statistic, and it's very. Most people are very disillusioned, but the idea of playing to those people, being the first people to play real kind of Western pop music to those people, was a great privilege. It was just that it was a pretty horrific couple of weeks because the place is so oppressive, the actual atmosphere. Also, there was a very great sense of deception, I felt, because we arrived believing that they were genuinely prepared to accept a little Western influence as part of their new policy, But basically, what it was, I think, was a gesture of. It was a kind of an empty gesture of saying, "Look, here we are. We're going to accept you, and we have all this industry that we want you to accept." When actually, what happened was that we played two concerts. That's all we did. One in Beijing, or Peking, which is obviously the most Chinese part of China you could.
Where did you play it? In the square?
No, we played
Indoor?
at what was it called? I'm not sure. It was
Outdoor?
an auditorium. It was an indoor auditorium, about 14,000 people, and we played there, and we played in Canton, which is about 100 miles from the Hong Kong border, therefore very much more westernised. But Beijing was the real test. And what happened basically was that we opened with a black DJ who had done we always used to open with DJs on tour as opposed to a support act, which we'd always found worked really well. And this guy did just about everything that a DJ could do. He did break dancing, he spun the records and scratching and everything. And they were absolutely crazy. They were absolutely mad for it. People were jumping up and down. They were out of their seats. He ran around the auditorium dancing and stuff to our music. And they were like on cloud nine. The entire place was out and out of their seats, reacting in a totally Western manner. That people were kissing him and trying to dance like him. It was absolutely brilliant. We've got it all on film. And what happened was that people came into the dressing room and said, Trevor, the DJ, is going down brilliantly. We're going to have no trouble whatsoever. And there was about a 15-minute break before we came on. And what happened was that in that 15-minute break, there was an announcement, obviously in Chinese, so we didn't understand it at the time. There was an announcement made to the audience that there was to be no dancing for the rest of the evening, and there were people to remain in their seats. In other words, they'd been frightened by the reaction they saw just to the opening act. So we went out and played to nothing. We went out and played to 13,000 people sitting down, which was really horrendous because we had no idea of this announcement, and all we knew was that we had, as far as we were concerned, we were not communicating. And there was one funny thing actually, is that when you actually tried to get the audience to clap, they have no perception of clapping in rhythm. So you'd clap and they would just applaud you. And everyone was smiling, but basically we just felt we really felt. The first feeling was of failure, that it was there was no way we could communicate. And then there was when we actually found out what had gone on, I was just furious. I'd gone through. We'd already been in Peking for about 5 days. I'd gone through endless meetings, protocol meetings with cabinet ministers and various things that really are not in. I'm a musician. I've no real desire to sit and I mean, obviously I felt responsibility at the time, but to represent in my generation from the West in a good light and pop music in a good light. I felt that we did have we had a responsibility to keep the doors open, as it were, for other acts. I genuinely thought that was what we were there to do. And after that, realising that they had no real intention of allowing people to absorb what we were doing, I just felt really betrayed. And also there were announcements on the radio, things like that, that those people who went to see the Wham concerts would go and enjoy it, but not. They literally told them not to learn from it. I mean, basically they said they were basically saying this is an isolated incident, and you're not going to see it again. So don't get any ideas. That's basically what they were saying. And from that point on, the trip for me was a bit of a nightmare because I felt really kind of like we were there and we were being used in an industrial sense. We were being used as a gesture that was not a genuine gesture, and I found it kind of nasty after that. But I mean, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. I wouldn't have missed the fact. When we talked to some of these Chinese people afterwards, and they were so excited, some of them were. It was just strange to see people that had not experienced anything like it. Even though it was a very, very ordinary by Western standards. There was nothing special about it. There was no special effects. It relied totally on the performance of the band and everything. It was just something that they were totally stunned by.
Well, while there's no mountains to climb in rock and roll, or new areas to discover, as you say, there's very few places. What is there that exists that you'd like to do? What is it?
What would I like to do? I mean, I have no. In terms of achievement, I have no mountains to climb or anything. I simply want to become. I simply want to become. I want to be very happy with what I've done. When my career is coming to a close. I mean, I don't think it will come to a close for a long time. I think I have always been able to see my own future as in the next couple of years. I knew I'd be here right now, and I knew 2 years ago I mean, I knew that 2 years ago, and 2 years before that, when we were just starting out, I knew we weren't going to be just another English pop band, and I knew that the basis of it was the songs I was writing. I suppose what I really want is to be able to do what I want creatively, succeed publicly, and be able to progress without screwing the rest of my life up. That's the way I see it, really, because I can't really relate to the pressures. I mean, I know the pressure that's going to come with the type of music that I'm going to release, because I don't think my music has reached anything like its peak. I think I'm a lot younger than most people that have found themselves in my position. Therefore, potentially, my career will be longer. And if you look at it this way, in 10 years' time, I'm only going to be 33 years old. 33 years old. There are a few people that in the rock business at 33 years old that are considered washed out. You know, in terms of age.
Yeah.
It's just that the fact that I am seen not just as an artist, and the fact that I'm seen in a sexual way. I mean, that I have that kind of springboard means that with the kind of music that I think I still have left in me, in 10 years' time I think I could be a very, very big star, as opposed to just a star. And although there is that half of me that wants it, there's another half of me that's very frightened of it as well, because I don't think it has a good effect on people's lives, and that's what I find. I suppose my main ambition is to balance the two things, you know, because I don't want to be dragged into the kind of downsides of this business that are so easy to fall into. You know, that's the main thing that frightens me about living over here as well. I mean, I'm very excited about the future, but at the same time it worries me.